marvelous Monday morning so far. I am here with a Memphis market update. Now, as always, I will be covering Shelby County as a whole and a few communities and zip codes within the county. I can't possibly go over every zip code and community, but just a few to give you a snapshot of what's going on in the Memphis market. Now, I will be reading the data because I want to make certain that I'm giving you accurate information and so I can stay on track. All right, so let's get into it. Starting out with Shelby County overall, last week we saw 101 active listings. The low end was 19,900. On the high was 1.5 million. 198 properties sold in Shelby County last week. The low was 20,000. The high was 905,000. And the average days on market for Shelby County, the properties that sold last week was about 40 days. I forgot to mention that the week I'm covering last week, March 21st through March 28th. Forgive me. So again, March 21st through March 28th, that's what I'm covering today. So moving on to Arlington, there were 6 active listings. The low end was 399,900. The high was 549,000. 11 properties sold in Arlington last week. The low was 266,000. The high was 422,000. The average days on market for the properties that sold last week was about 11 days. Moving on to Bartlett, there were 6 active listings in Bartlett last week. The low was 145,000. The high was 311,000. 19 properties sold in Bartlett last week. 113,000 on the low end and 350,000 on the high end. And the average days on market for the properties that sold last week was about 47 days. Moving on to Collierville. Collierville, there were 12 active listings in Collierville last week. The low was 415,000. The high was 1.3 million. 18 properties sold in Collierville last week. The low was 190,000 and the high was 786,000. The average days on market for the properties that sold last week was about 24 days. In Cordova, there were 7 active listings last week. The low was 175,000, the high 409,000. 26 properties sold in Cordova last week. The low was 165,000, the high was 595,000. And the average days on market for the properties that sold last week was about 12 days. Moving on to East Memphis, looking at the zip codes 38117, 38119, and 38120. There were 7 active listings in East Memphis last week. The low was 124,900. The high was 769,500. 20 properties sold in East Memphis last week. The low was 70,000. The high was 627,500. The average days on market for the properties that sold last week was about 14 days. Moving on to Germantown, there were 2 active listings in Germantown last week. The low was 874,900 and the high was 1.5 million. 8 properties sold in Germantown last week. The low was 215,000 and the high was 900,000, excuse me. The average days on market for the properties that sold last week was 15 days. Moving on to Midtown, looking at the zip code 38104 in Midtown. There was 1 active listing in Midtown last week. The price was $189,900. 4 properties sold in Midtown last week. The low was $42,500. The high was $260,000. And the average days on market for the properties that sold in Midtown was about 77 days. And moving on to Southeast Memphis, looking at the zip codes 38141 and 38125. There were 3 active listings in Southeast Memphis. The low was 134,900. The high was 444,000. 9 properties sold in Southeast Memphis last week. The low was 69,950 and the high was 820,000. The average days on market for the properties that sold last week in Southeast Memphis was 25 days. Now, as you can see from this data, we are still in a seller's market. Inventory is extremely low right now in the Memphis market as well as across the country. One factor that is contributing to the shortage in supply, well, the increase in buyers, is the interest rates are still fairly low, and I'll cover that. So last week, the average interest rates across the country for a 30-year fix was 3.5%. For a 15-year fixed rate, it was 2.9%. And then for a 5-year adjustable rate mortgage, the average was 3.3%. Now, again, interest rates are still fairly low, hanging around the threes, and this is encouraging more people to become home owners. So that's why we are in this seller's market where there are an abundance of buyers and not very much inventory. So if you're a homeowner in this market and you're considering selling your home, it can be very advantageous to you because there is such a high demand for homes. I hope this information has been helpful for you. If so, feel free to comment. Please comment, share, and like. And until next week, I hope you have a fantastic week and enjoy the rest of your Monday and be blessed.